When I ask two boys who come to me separately to say, I feel lonely, I feel isolated, I ask them, why don't you talk to each other? Yeah, it's like, wait, what? How can, if the same thing was, अच्छा दारू है, of course, दारू के बाद तो I love you भाई, तू तो मेरा दुनिया का सबसे best आदमी, you know.
But for whatever reason, he felt like he does not have a safe space, which I feel is really tragic. And unfortunately, why have we jumped to this place where somebody has to be blamed for him dying, as you said? Why does it always come to that?
If men have been conditioned to never talk about their emotions and they do feel safe talking around women, then they should. But what happens is that they sort of keep it limited to that. As a feminist, I would like to say that ends up becoming a little bit of a burden.
It is unfair that we have constantly throughout history only expected women to be there for the men in their lives. उनकी अपनी भी जिंदगी में problems हैं जो तुम नहीं सुन रहे हो.
How many men have you seen mocking Taylor Swift? But there is a reason why there is a huge fan following of women who relate to that kind of music. It is cathartic for a lot of women. So don't look down upon those conversations, those artists. I mean, that's I think step one. Just try it. Try writing a song about your feelings.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of So What. We are joined again, I said it differently this time, we're joined again by Nikhil and Garima, who now qualify to be called recurring guests since they have showed up for 3 episodes in a row. Nikhil is, of course, chief and co-founder at Yuva. Garima asked to not be identified as an award-winning writer, which she is, by the way, and also first employee of Yuva. We're going to start with a section called So How You Feeling? But as part of that, what we want is your rose and your thorn. A rose is something that you feel happy about. A thorn is something that you feel annoyed, upset, angry about. And we're trying to limit it to 2 sentences because last time Garima got upset that her thorn was cut out. Garima, you want to repeat your thorn from last week so that we can make up?
No, golden
I have
words
a
are not
question.
repeated.
Yes.
Will we have appraisals on this podcast? Because if we went from sometimes guests to now recurring guests,
Yes.
do we get to be co-hosts at some point?
At some point.
At some point.
At some point.
How do you decide whether we are
That's
good
up to
enough?
me.
That's up to you.
Like any good
Is there
appraisal
ratings?
process, it is completely arbitrary and in my control. So I will let you know when you get there.
Interesting.
We'll see. Once you're done with your probation period of 3 months, if you've been regular.
Yeah, because
Then we'll
there are 3 people
consider.
on this podcast, but it always is so what with Kevin Lee.
That is
What about
true.
Garima Kunzru and
Aren't you guys getting tagged and collabs and stuff?
Yeah, and if Nikhil starts hosting, I mean, the length of the podcast is going to be 4 hours long.
Wow.
you know, there are people over here who actually care about deep conversations and meaningful ones that
think
go
I
on for a
don't.
while.
I mean, I'd heard all your stories, so like, I need an award to listen to that podcast all.
Yeah, we know you already.
Yeah.
So this is like 7 years of knowing you distilled into 7 hours.
Yeah.
Chalo, theek hai, fair
Yeah.
enough.
We prefer the long version of which is knowing you.
Yeah,
And not
you
listening to
prefer
your
it.
podcast.
She
Yeah,
has
I'm
a
just
problem
like-
with it. Clearly.
Like
I should have just heard the podcast.
Yeah.
on
I'll
that
give you
note,
an award now. Wait.
Rose and Thorn.
Yes.
Nikhil, you want Garima, do you have notes for this week?
Yeah, I checked my notes.
Oh, off camera.
Yes. No,
Okay.
it's on camera.
Efficient.
My rose is that I made a very yummy brownie 2 days back. A healthy brownie.
I saw it on your Instagram stories.
Yeah. It was very good. And I'm going to make it again today, hopefully. Or tomorrow.
What inspired you to make this brownie?
The fact that I can't eat gluten and I can't eat dairy and I can't eat like 10 different things. So
Why?
because of gut issues. So my thorn is Women's Day is around the corner, and I absolutely despise all the campaigns that happen around this time because it's just pinkwashing. It's just for the heck of it. They don't really mean it, and a lot of times it's not even empowerment. Like it's literally just like patriarchy dressed in pink frocks. So. And what's more infuriating on Women's Day is when women come up on their stories and say, I would like to thank the men in my life who do make my life easier. I'm like, shut up. There is one day we are talking about this, and on that day also you want to thank the men in your life. Shut up.
Would you rather that there's no acknowledgement of, like, would you rather live in a world where there's no Women's Day?
I would rather live in a world where there is like more policies around women empowerment and more like actual stuff happening for women than just, yay, happy Women's Day.
Okay, but since we can't get that world immediately,
Yeah. What
in
if
today's world, Women's Day is erased from the calendar, are
Yeah,
you happier
nobody
or
cares.
sadder?
I'm
Nobody
happier.
cares. You're happier.
Yeah.
But what about
What about all the free drinks that you get?
yeah?
What about the free? I don't drink. I'm a
Not for you, for the other women who like
No,
this free drinks.
Nobody should drink, like men, women. Stop drinking, guys. Ask Nikhil
Okay.
about his thoughts and opinions.
Nikhil, what are your thoughts?
How
and
about
opinions?
first you tell?
Yeah,
What is your
Kevin, you
rose
tell
and-
us.
Wow, thanks, guys. Nice role reversals.
Exactly.
I normally use the time when you are talking about stuff to think of my stuff.
Why
Which
do
is
you
why
think
I
when
don't
even
pay
Garima-
attention fully to what you guys are
Faltu,
saying
he's been
sometimes.
accusing us when nobody asks me when we're actually giving you.
It's true. It's like a filler to give me more
Yeah.
time to think.
You've got
Um,
your name already on this. Why do you need like?
Yeah, this should be a
Thoughts.
rose in every episode. And I have a
That might-
podcast.
Wow. Okay, guys. Thank you for asking again. Very courteous. Maybe you will be co-host someday, and I look forward to that day. My rose and thorn this week are the same thing. My rose is that it's my birthday this week,
Oh,
as
happy
I spoke
birthday!
about last week.
HBD.
And Nikhil asked me, on Thursday, can we do this meeting? And I said, remember when we were on the podcast and I told you that it's my birthday and I'm traveling to Missouri? And he didn't remember. So
I don't remember what day it is in general. It's not to do about your
I mean,
birthday.
it's okay. I love you. So my rose is that. My thorn is that obviously I'm getting older by virtue of it being my birthday. I'm going to turn 32, which is very weird for me because I still feel like when somebody asks me how old I am, I still think I'm 27 or 20. Like that's the first answer that comes to my mind.
You were 32 when I met you.
I mean, mentally, sure. Mentally, sure. But there's something weird about it. Like it's getting close to like mid 30s territory, I feel. It's still early 30s now. Nikhil, rose and thorn.
My thorn is that I am.
Starting with negativity.
Why
man.
can't
We are
I-
starting with negativity.
Yeah, because I
You're
want
such
to
a
like.
positive person.
But on this podcast, he gets
My
to embrace
thorn
his
is I want to talk about the
mean
thorn first because it has been annoying me. So every time I have to go for I'm going for a little break from work, and every time I have to do that, I try to plan all my shoots in a way that I'm getting done 3 weeks in advance. And for the last 3 weeks, I have to finish my shoots, and they keep getting postponed for one reason or the other. And now I'm just so annoyed because I feel like even till the last day of my work I will still have like a shoot hanging over my head. So yeah, when you're shooting with a lot of particularly because we do so much work with celebrities and creators, it's not in your hands. You just literally in limbo. You just have to wait, and if they decide that aaj nahi ho sakta, you can't do shit.
Do you want to name the celebrity who's making
No,
your life
and
difficult?
I understand also, it's not like, everybody has their own
This is safe space,
prioritizations.
you can-
No, but it is. It's not, it's just like I always see that these things happen when I have some other plans. But when you don't have plans, then everything works out like very immediately. ये तो हाँ चलो कल क्या आज हो जाएगा. But then the moment you have plans and you have a deadline and you're like इससे पहले खत्म करना, वो हमेशा उसके बाद या वहां तक जाकर फिर. So I'm just really annoyed that I still have more shoots to finish even though I'm going on a break. The rose is actually very cool. So I used to I grew up in the Middle East, and I used to love reading this magazine called Esquire, which is now in India, but it's huge in the middle. I mean, it was huge in the Middle East. It's huge in America, UK, etc. And there used to be one of the columns in it, which I've referred to multiple times also over the years at Yuva. There's a column called Things I've Learned, and I used to love it so much that I used to cut it out, and I've made a file of all the things I've learned over the years from Esquire. And it if there's one men's magazine or which kind of I can literally give credit to for teaching me stuff about masculinity or male emotions, it was Esquire. And now Esquire has launched launched in India, and in their debut issue they've done a profile on me. So for me this is like a huge
Congratulations.
yeah, like life coming full circle from the guy who used to cut out Esquire, which is not maybe a good thing to say, but I made a file out of them and I kept them with me to now being in that magazine. I think I'm very happy. And the other cool thing is that Hrithik Roshan, who I absolutely love and adore, is on the cover of this. So it's also serendipity to me that Hrithik's on the cover, I am inside, and we have spoken about Be a Man here. So really, like, it's very validating. It's very life full circle.
It's very wholesome and congratulations. And obviously now I'll make fun of it also because
He has full circle moments with everything. When he got featured on HT, also he wrote.
But it was, I
You
started
have
with
full circle
Hindustan
moments
you
with
Times.
have too many relationships in your life with things.
Yeah.
Not really.
Like if I ever get
Yeah.
featured, I'll be like, yeah, thanks.
Anyway.
My thing is like his rose is like a flex now.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
become a recurring thing.
Yeah.
Like last week it was about attending Prajakta's wedding.
How is that a flex? Explain that to
You
me.
got to attend
She's my
spoke
friend.
about it. We spoke
Yeah,
about
of course. But that itself is
it. That
like,
itself is a flex.
How is that?
dude, people
I
must be
I
jealous
know
of
her
it.
No, but
since
he
before
also
she
spoke
was
about
famous.
the award.
Oh, sure.
He
But
spoke about the award also.
yeah, he spoke about the award also.
Yeah, so that's
the
a flex.
Empower Award.
So
Do
why?
you agree?
How about you also flex in every episode?
We
And
don't have those many achievements.
you can.
No, this is like what
Why
attack.
don't you be
He's like,
successful?
why aren't you successful
Yeah.
enough?
Why are you guys not on the magazine?
You can. Oh, you.
This is how rich people are
how
like, why are you
about-
so poor?
How about as my friends, you can also be like, I have a flex. Nikhil's done this cool thing.
Then what will your rose be
Yeah.
for that week?
I'll find something. I'll be like,
You
oh,
have other
my rose.
achievements too.
My rose would be. I have such good friends that their flex is my flex.
Nobody
I'd be
watched this
like-
podcast. I would tune out.
Oh,
Okay,
Bullshit. Like
just
if
be
I
like,
win an award, you
my
will never
flex
be
is
like.
my rose is that Nikhil.
I have
had-
been harping about you winning that award to every.
But
human
it's not
being on
your
earth.
rose.
It is my life's rose. You know how many people I show off and say
It's my-
that
He's my
Honestly,
guardian.
Garima is a Filmfare Award winning writer.
It's my life's
That's
rose to have met you. Like I know it's sounding funny, but I mean it.
To get to the main story this week, in a segment called So What Happened. And before that, I will also have to give a trigger warning because this has to do with suicide. There was a man named Manav Sharma, who's an employee of TCS, which has become his identifier, which also we should talk about, who died by suicide. And he left behind a video which talks a little bit about his wife, who has then been dragged into kind of this media spotlight and accused of infidelity, among other things. And since then, there's been this whole discourse where she has, of course, responded, and it has come to light that he had attempted suicide multiple times before. He's clearly somebody who has troubled mental health. And now it's kind of become this circus of people blaming each other. I want to talk about it from two major perspectives. We're not going to get too much into the clinical mental health angle of it, but I have spoken to a therapist about this, and that will be a segment that we will play at some point also to discuss that very specifically, given that we're not experts. But I do want to talk about two things. One is, why is it harder for men, or why do men feel like there are no safe spaces? And why do we hear about these things when they've progressed to the point of death by suicide? And just from a lived experience point of view with friends that we have, people in our lives, I want to discuss that. To set some context, I want to also read some facts because we've done like a little bit of research on it. It's just generally accepted that men tend to die by suicide more often than women do, despite women having more attempts at suicide. So obviously mental health is a thing that affects everybody regardless of gender. But it is true that even in India, a man is twice as likely to die by suicide than a woman. And last week we did this lovely chat on Mrs. It was a feminist chat by feminists. And as always, a lot of comments talk about, why aren't you talking about men? Why aren't you talking about men's mental health? And if we are the same people who are saying that men should not only bring up mental health issues in response to something that happens to a woman or in response to a conversation that is around women, let's treat this as a space where we are talking about something that has happened to a man. And hence, let's get into it. So that was context that I want to set. So don't have to talk too much about the specifics of the case because we also don't know, and it is an evolving story. But this is the larger background of what is happening. Opening thoughts from either of you?
I think you should start.
I think you should start because you've
Yeah.
also now read about this case. I want to hear your POV also about.
Yeah, sure. So I've read about this case. I also spoke to a therapist. And one of the things he mentioned, which I feel like we all know is inherently true, and maybe that's a good starting point for this conversation, is that he said that men are more likely to see their problems as burdens that they don't want to place on other people. And he talked about how when men come to therapy, to him also, it takes a lot more to get them to talk about the things that are bothering them. And very often they feel like there is a lack of safe spaces for men, whereas women are much more likely to form community and have friends who they're talking to regularly about their thoughts and feelings. So we got into a very interesting kind of side conversation about how men friendships are based a lot more on common interests. And hence, when men want somebody to talk to about emotions, a lot of that burden or a lot of that weight is basically funneled to their romantic partners, who happen to be women. So this whole thing of like men will only talk about emotions to women, and that burden is obviously unfair for women also to carry. But at the same time, men clearly don't feel safe enough to talk about their feelings with men. And that is what leads to this. And one of the things, again, with specific regard to this case, is that the wife has kind of said that on the day when he died by suicide, when he had locked himself up in his room, she had messaged his sister because it was established that he has attempted suicide before. And he messaged his sister, and his sister said something to the lines of, "You need to be strong and ignore it. It's okay, let it be, it will be fine." And clearly it's not fine. So at some point, it has clearly become so much of a burden on the family also, and they've, for whatever reason, maybe not reached out for professional help or not had access to it, which we don't know at this point. But that sort of proves the point on some way, that this man, for whatever it's worth, and let's maybe not even talk about the video where he's talking about his wife, but for whatever reason, he felt like he does not have a safe space, which I feel is really tragic. And unfortunately, I feel like the conversation is never just about that. The conversation is like, why have we jumped to this place where somebody has to be blamed for him dying by suicide? You know, and why does it always come to that? But obviously, you and I are men. Garima talks to men romantically and otherwise. So I want to examine from a lived experience, from a day-to-day perspective, how does that play out? Yeah, that's what I would set as like larger context for this. Both of you are very hesitant.
Yeah. I mean, given the barrage of hate comments you've gotten on our last video. So interestingly, you pointed out that men, and this is, I think, a known fact, that men, don't talk about their emotions as openly as women do. And this, I'm just not saying because of my lived experience with men, but I think this is just research. This is just facts. These are numbers, literally, at this point. And the men who do feel comfortable opening up tend to open up with their female friends. And I think that has got something to do with the fact that talking about emotions is primarily given a feminine connotation. So when they tend to open up with men, at least not in my circles, but this is common, like this is pop culture stuff. You must have seen it in films where they're called gay, or they're called to man up, or they're called girls, or like don't be a girl about it, which sort of hinders them further from opening up. They tend to open up with their female friends about these things. And interestingly, it's, see, again, I will not say that it's a burden, because I get it. Like, of course, if it's conditioning, if men have been conditioned to never talk about their emotions and they do feel safe talking around women, then they should. But what happens is that they sort of keep it limited to that, right? They keep it limited to just talking to women about it, which, sure, yes, I as a feminist, I would like to say that ends up becoming a little bit of a burden. But keeping that aside, I think I want to emphasize on the fact that this is also a learned skill, right? Talking about our emotions. It did not come naturally to us. We were encouraged, yes. We had a lot of female friendships in school, college, where talking is just encouraged, right? And a lot of talking is also discouraged in the sense that it's called gossip. And you put it down by saying, oh, women are just gossiping. But we know for a fact that at the core of gossip lies a lot of just interpersonal connections, a lot of lived experiences, a lot of truths, even if it's happening in a very chatty manner, whatever, right? It's still something that we have had to learn. It was not always easy to voice out what we were feeling. And I feel like if men don't practice this with their male friends, they will always turn to female partners or female friends for advice. And it will just, this cycle will never end. Because I feel like, yes, women can be there, but to what extent, like how will I understand the lived experience of a man beyond a certain point? I can lend a ear, I can be empathetic, I can be like, oh yes, I get it, but to actually make some progress in the so-called male loneliness epidemic which people are talking about nowadays, you need to be having conversations with your fellow male friends, right? You need to be having these difficult conversations, and I have so much to say about it. I feel like I've broken into a monologue, but how many times have we watched a film where forget film, how many times I have known men who just meet for, watching a match, or who just meet to kind of like get some drinks, where they don't really have to look into each other's eyes and just, have a debrief about what their week or month has been like. Whereas girls literally just do that. They literally just do sleepovers where they're talking, they're overanalyzing, overthinking about all their relationships, about interpersonal relationships that they've had. This is literally what we do, and I know it's looked down upon, but it helps. Like, try it. It really helps to kind of just rant about things, because it's talking, and talking helps. And I don't know, when I want to ask you guys, when was the last time that you met a friend? And I know that you guys are very woke, so this is probably not the correct audience for it, but I mean, should I just open it up to the audience and ask them, comment down below, when was the last time you met your guy friends without the intention of, say, games or sports or like other things, and just had a heart to heart?
I have, before we get to Nikhil, I have like a reply to it, right? And it's something that I've seen with my own male friendships. It ties back to something I spoke about last week also, about norms and how normal it is for you to open up to a man about this stuff. There are very good individual relationships that I have with some of my friends, where the basis of the friendship is that we will talk about our feelings. But normally, and I would love Nikhil's kind of POV on this as well, but like when I was growing up, normally the way it happens is that you have a group of friends in school, or the friends that you're playing with. And a lot of times those are based, when we are children and don't have emotions that we can talk about, it is based on sports, it is based on movies that you watch, etc. So your oldest group of friends is likely somebody who you met like that, right? Because at that point we didn't have the developed frontal cortex to talk about emotions, or didn't feel emotions that much. And male bonding is supposed to be, again, the norm is that male bonding is easy, like the idea of like it's chill, that it's like you'll meet, you'll chill for a beer, it's like it's and that is also time that I find myself craving quite a lot, even now as an adult. I will feel that once in a while I should just meet male friends, and I need that energy in life. It is something that replenishes me also, right? So that I feel like is more common for male friend groups. And once you then get to a level or an age, or you have experiences where you need emotional support, chances are that you will make an effort to talk to your friends about it, and then you don't get the response that you want. And at that point, it becomes the thing that, oh, at this point, should I find more friends or different friends?
Yeah.
And then you end up talking to a girl about it, and the first time you talk to a girl who understands you, because it's the first time you're talking to somebody who's giving you validation or acceptance, that is amazing. It's actually, I have the perfect parallel for it. It is in Dear Zindagi when Alia Bhatt talks to Shah Rukh Khan and falls in love with him because she's not. That's what I feel like men feel like when they are talking to a girl, and they're like, oh wow, I have a space to talk about this. And because of the reasons that you mentioned, and maybe it is a skill, there is effort required. And I'm quite often frustrated by my boys' group chats, multiple group chats, for being shallow, or for only talking about interests or sports or video games or whatever. I remember when I found out I'm going to be the CEO of Yuva, it was during COVID, and I was doing like a vacation with two of my friends in Dehradun. So I was in Bombay and I was heading back to Dehradun, and I told them that, by the way, like I'm going to be CEO. And their response was like, woohoo, when you're on your way back, just get beer so that we can celebrate. That was the limit of it. And still on that group chat, like now we've done the podcast, etc. We've done a few episodes. A lot of my female friends have reached out individually to say they love it. One of my best friends, who's a guy, has commented on the YouTube, right? And there's like on the YouTube video, there's a long comment that says insightful conversation, this is. So I just took a screenshot and sent it to him and said, why didn't you just tell me? So I feel like it's not as easy, which obviously I'm sure you understand, but it's not easy because it's not incentivized, and I would not change the group of friends I have because we don't have emotional conversations. I would seek out other people. And then I think it's human nature to then try to balance out your friendships where you have a mix of everything. So for me, that's my answer. But would love to know from you also how you see it.
I'll have to give a monologue. I'm pretexting this with this because obviously this is a thing that I am deeply invested in, and as a topic, I do a whole podcast around masculinity. And more importantly, I get very concerned and upset when I see this happen over and over again, right? We have now seen multiple male suicides where they've made videos and spoken to the world, and then and whether it is they blamed a woman, which I also want to come to, but whether it is they blamed a woman or something else, they've told the world that I was unhappy, maybe somebody else is to blame, and now I'm taking my life. First of all, there's something called the Werther effect, which is a idea that of copycat suicides. That when you see someone, and in this case, as an example, after the Atul Subhash case, we have seen two other suicides back to back with very similar in nature in terms of what they communicated to the world. So when there is a famous case of suicides, it actually prompts or triggers people who are going through tough mental health to also want to do something. It almost empowers them to take it, and these are. So there is a thing that is happening here, which of course is not part of the discourse because, when have we ever had intelligent discourse in this country? So wo to ab hatai do side pe. But it is very concerning that for me, the thing that always strikes me is that why is it that these men who are putting out videos talking about I was very unhappy and now I'm killing myself, and I want the world to know that male mental health is important and men are also lonely and we need to talk about men's issues. Why don't they do a video like this when they're alive? Why don't they try to communicate what they're going through, while they're going through it? Why is it that when they're only at the end of the rope, they are going to want to communicate this? And it's a very concerning thing. And again, no discourse on this. There is zero conversation about why is it so difficult for men to talk about their mental health when they're going through a tough time, and not when they have decided a recourse for it, and that recourse is, their own death, right? And obviously not in any case trying to find ways of helping themselves. Now I want to also explain this, I think it is important to say because, and not just because we get hate for all of this, etc., etc. I do think it's the male loneliness epidemic in many ways is based on truth. Like it is very hard for men to express themselves. It is very hard for men to be emotional. It is very hard for men to talk about their mental health. And I would know that because it was hard for me. I went through anxiety when I was 30, and it took me I think months and months of going through shit in my head before I even decided that I would take help. And literally again, I was also at the end of my rope, and my decision was to go to therapy versus doing something. Whereas, for other cases where again, we don't know whether they don't have access to therapy, they don't believe in mental health therapy or whatever it is. So we don't know why it has happened, but we know that they didn't look for alternatives, or there wasn't an alternative in front of them. So I know I have gone through that, and hence I know that it is very difficult for men. Now I've spent, since I got therapy at 30 and I'm 38, I've spent the last 8 years of my life trying to understand this. I have gone across the country. I've met a lot of young people. I've done now 2 seasons of Be a Man Yaar. I have researched it, studied it, met more 15,000 young people to talk about it. I have spoken to multiple psychologists, etc., etc. And here's what I have understood broadly. And I don't know how much of this can explain what is happening right now, but I want, and some of this you both may have heard, but I think it's important to set this context for everybody else who's listening. There is an experiment I do when I go to campuses. I don't know if you're aware of that experiment. You've also come with me, traveled with me, but I ask students, many colleges, not all I would say, but what is the word that comes to your mind when you think of mother? what is the word? You tell me. What do you think that they respond? If you remember or if you know. Or for that matter, what do you think it is?
Nurture, love.
Love.
Comfort.
Love.
Yeah.
It's love.
Mm.
When you ask young people, what is the word that comes to your mind when you think mother? The overwhelming response is love. And then it could be nurturing, empathy, comfort, whatever, the hugs, etc. But love. When you ask young people, what is the word that comes to your mind when you think of father? What do you think that word is?
Discipline.
Discipline. Even I was thinking of discipline. Yeah.
So discipline. The word that has come up over and over again is anger. So when, imagine 15,000 young people are met in the country, and the word that comes to most young people's mind when I ask what is the word that you associate with father, it is anger. It is fear. It is respect. It is discipline. Whereas with mother, it is love, empathy, comfort, hugs. What does this tell you about society? And I don't want to make like an esoteric point over here. I'm very practically, what does this tell you? When a child's first understanding of women, and relatives, of course, but the woman in their life is the mother, right? Their understanding is women se mujhe mil raha hai pyar, empathy, love. And their understanding is आदमी से मुझे मिलता है डर, violence sometimes, anger, fear, respect, discipline. जो बोला जाता है बार बार ये मेरा प्यार है. So even when fathers discipline you, they always say, this is my way of showing love. So their understanding, in all our understanding, this is our training. This is not just, I'm not talking about some other person. This is my training. I'm sure this is yours. Everybody's training. At least boys in specific. And I would speak, I think, for the both of us over here. So when your understanding about gender is this, that woman se pyar milta hai, aadmi se mujhe dar milta hai, that is the way that you look at the world growing up also. When you look at, you expect that if I need to have an emotional, empathetic space, I will only get it from a woman because I've got that from my mother. And with the boy, there's always a danger that it could turn into anger, fear, discipline, respect, whatever it is, right? So you're afraid of speaking up in front of another boy. Now, the other part of it is, of course, the practicalities of it is that unfortunately boys in our country are forced to become men before they can learn what it means to be human. They are constantly told by their fathers and by other people also, sometimes even mothers, in a patriarchal environment, even mothers sometimes tell boys when they're crying that, as you said very much, you can't cry, you can't show emotion, you have to be strong, you have to be macho, you have to be a man. And the moment you start training a boy saying that any sign of emotion that you'd express, any sign of vulnerability, any sign of softness, they're constantly, everybody tells you, तुम्हें दुनिया खा जाएगी, तुम लड़के हो, तुम नहीं ऐसे बन सकते. And because we almost extract the sensitivity out of any boy, they become the boys that then become that to other sensitive boys are the ones who bully them, right? Because they're like, it's a dog eat dog world is constantly what is told to boys. You're growing up, you're always told, either you are the bully or you are the bullied. So when you're growing up in that idea, with that idea, and I'm talking again about general, okay, I'm not saying that this is specific because everybody sometimes is like, मेरे साथ तो ये नहीं होता, very good तुम्हारे साथ नहीं होता, बहुत अच्छी बात है. I'm so glad you've grown up in a fortunate, and a really happy setup. But this is the case, and I'm talking on the basis of meeting 15,000 and more young people. This is happening across our country, north, south, east, west, northeast. It's central. It's happening everywhere. So now extrapolating this to now what is happening in the current environment. I also ask so many boys, when so many boys come to me and when they tell me after our sessions, which are safe spaces, we ask young people to express themselves. Girls are typically talking about harassment because that is the thing that is the reality of most women in our country. Boys are at the core talking about loneliness. When I ask two boys who come to me separately to say, I feel lonely, I feel isolated, I don't think I have people around me, I ask them, why don't you talk to each other? And they're like,
It's a radical idea.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what? How can... Agar now, the same thing, as you said, if the same thing was, acha, daru hai, now will you talk? And of course, daru ke baad to I love you, bhai, tu to mera duniya ka sabse best, you change because you need substance abuse to be able to express yourself, because at that point of time, you don't care about what the world is thinking. You forget everything that your mother, father, society told you, and you are able to be vulnerable. But if you don't have that substance, you are not vulnerable. You are not, because you are afraid of judgment, you're afraid of being bullied, you're afraid of being mocked, you're afraid of being judged, which is what happens to a lot of boys and men in our country. The reason, and again, I'm now answering the same question, and it's taken a long time to get to, but I'm answering the same question. The reason that all of these men who have killed themselves, have not made that video while they were alive is because if they were made this video while they were alive, everybody today who's commenting and saying that, what happened to this guy, we should all stand up for this guy, we should stand up for his mental health, the same people would have mocked this person. They would have been like, तू आदमी है क्या, तू इतनी क्या mental health की, तू खड़ा नहीं हो सकता क्या, मार उसको या कुछ कर अपने आप को, stand up for yourself. This is what the same people would have said, because that is the truth of our the truth of our society. The same people, and I'm including men, women, everybody at this point of time, the same people who are saying, why has this person killed himself or done something to himself, would have been the people who would never have supported had this person spoke about their mental health while they were going through it, because that is the society we have created. So it's for me, the concerns are at multiple levels. It's the fact that we are not, as a society, creating enough spaces for men to feel that they are safe. And it's not just, and I really implore men who are watching this, please don't just put this expectation on the women in your lives. It is unfair to them. It is unfair that we have constantly throughout history only expected women to be there for the men in their lives. उनकी अपनी भी जिंदगी में problems है जो तुम नहीं सुन रहे हो. Take the time, create the spaces, get your friends involved in a conversation where you are able to tell the male friend in your life what you're going through. Create those spaces. We need to push the men in our lives to be like we have done that to each other, Kevin.
Yeah.
I have you, and this is the best example for that, right? I have seen you go through shit and I have said, Chal, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Whenever you have gone through and we have gone out, no work talk. I remember in COVID also, there were times where we were both overwhelmed and I said, I want to have a non-work chat with you.
Yeah.
Just want to talk about what I'm going through. And then we've spent 2 to 3 hours just having a conversation about our feelings. What are we feeling at this point of time? And that is what friendship should look like. And that is what male friendship can look like. The reason Be a Man has been created is to give an example to people, to say, you can also have emotional, vulnerable chats with your male friends. Please do it. Don't just wait for the women in your lives to create that space for you. You create it for yourself. Create this space, and that burden will then actually ease up, because the more spaces you create, the more spaces will get created and will benefit you also.
I think, yeah, it's essentially this, that women, even as they are getting empowered, they are taking on this role of, helping men develop these social circles where they can talk about their feelings. But it is up to men also to sort of, I was reading about it online, and there was this Reddit thread where a lot of men were talking about, oh, nobody asked women to do this. We don't want to be set up on these dates, and we don't want to meet new friends. And that's the thing, that you think you don't want these connections, you think you don't want these outlets, but you do, because, you don't know it, but you do, because how else are you going to talk about your emotions? And I think that's really important.
No, so this thing that happened with me came to mind. I was, after I think season 1 released, I was at some award show, and there's this one kid who comes up to me and says, some 19, 20-year-old who's like, I love the episode. Zakir ka episode is, I think, the greatest thing on the internet, etc., etc. He's like, but I really want you to also talk about, if you can, in the next season, about heartbreak, and कि जब लड़की छोड़ के जाती है कितना लगता है वगैरह वगैरह. So I asked him out of concern that, how are you feeling? You've lost. What happened with have you broken up? And he said, yeah, I had a girlfriend and then we broke up. I said, why did you break up? And he's like, because I feel like she never got me. I feel like anytime that I used to, and he's like, that's why I resonate with your show. Anytime I used to talk to her about my feelings, after a point she's just like, I don't want to listen. And then she left me, So I don't think that you could create a space from. Now, when you look at the story independently, immediately you're like, oh, woman is the villain. She didn't give the man a space to talk about his feelings, etc., etc. And that's what I would imagine is the narrative in his head, right? I asked him a simple question. I was like, when you feel things, have you ever spoken to your male friends about it? And he's like, no. I was like, why not? And he's like, वो शायद समझेंगे नहीं. मैंने कहा क्यों नहीं समझेंगे? Why are you not giving any credit to your male friends for showing up for you? Why do you already तुमने assume कर दिया कि तुम्हारे दोस्त समझेंगे नहीं. कोशिश तो करो समझाने की. हो सकता है शायद समझ जाए. You know, but he's like, no, I didn't tell anyone. So I was like, so let me ask another question. Anytime you felt emotion, the only person in the world you have told this emotion to was your girlfriend. He's like, yes. I was like, I just want to, another third question. Do you feel like if that was to happen with you, if there was one person who would only talk about their entire emotion only with you, would you also not feel overwhelmed? He's like, नहीं आपकी बात तो सही है. मैंने कहा हाँ बस फिर देख. And this is, I mean, again, it's almost like this is a really clearly a thoughtful kid, because he, by the end of this conversation, he himself was like, I acknowledge maybe I put too much on her plate, and you are right, I should have also spoken to my male friends, and I feel like now I want to do that more. And this was a 10-minute conversation, so I don't know how we had this emotional arc, but somehow we did. And this is like a best case scenario. But in the worst case scenario, there are boys who would just be like, no, why should I talk to my male friends, etc. वो मेरी girlfriend हक बनता है कि उसको सुनना वगैरह वगैरह. And I just feel like that is not the way you have to look at life. Every time I meet a young boy like that, I always, sometimes older men, you know, I have the same conversation. It is unfair. Make sure that you have other people in your life that you are extending, that you are putting, giving, who you're sharing with, so that it's equally distributed among multiple people versus just all the burdens on that one person, who in most situations when it comes to boys is a woman.
It's just a funny thing that when I was in a relationship,
Which one?
Separate episode.
I hate you. This was like a recurring thing that, you know, whenever
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
This was a recurring thing where every time he would talk about his feelings and he would cry about it, he would often preface it with by saying that I only have ever cried in front of my girlfriends. And I was like, is that a flex? Because that's not okay. Like, why are you only crying in front of your friends? And he could be having, we could have had the worst fight in the world, and his friends came and within 2 seconds, he's the most entertaining person in the party. And I was like, this is scary. Why can't you just sit down and have these conversations? And when we broke up, I must say this, when we broke up, I have messaged his friends saying, please make sure he's okay and he eats, because he was in the worst place. I was in the worst place ever, but I had some 10 girls to talk to. My sister, who literally lives with me, I had so many people already. They were up to date with what's happening with my life.
Even I knew.
You didn't know.
I knew.
You knew much later.
I knew.
Wow.
Also later.
Later, yeah.
Ouch. Okay.
That's
This is
why we
also
started
gendered,
this
by the way.
podcast. Yeah.
This is not gendered.
Of course it is.
It's not. It's
How many men knew?
Yeah.
firstly, we were having a fight that time.
I remember.
Yeah. And how many men knew?
Yeah.
It's actually really interesting because my sister was on a video call with her boyfriend and her best friend. So now this has become like a group chat where I'm getting men's opinion also. I'm like, what do you think? And they're like,
On
you're
purpose we
sounding.
meant, but okay, go
Yeah.
on.
These were the only men who knew.
No, of course there were other men
We'll have
also
a
who knew.
chat on friendship
It's like
later.
when she said, I have fans on the podcast, and then she named
I
one
didn't
person.
say our fans. But yeah, it was me who was sort of still, even after the breakup, looking out for this person and texting his friends saying, please, I know you guys, play stuff, but can you just make sure he's okay? Because I was constantly checking up with his friends. Has he eaten? Is he okay? I was worried. I was like, what if something happens? And that's the thing, right? Even when shit hits the roof, they will act all normal with their friends.
This is where I think an important thing to say is, I think we are failing our boys as a society. Okay, I don't want to talk about men because I feel like men still have enough agency to be able to find help. And while I still empathize with men who are not able to do that, I still feel like there is now enough discourse around for men to have to try alternatives. But when it comes to boys, when it comes to young boys in our country, how are we failing? We have been able to today, and I'm saying this with knowing that there is still a very long way to go. Having said that, at least there is a conversation that we are now able to have with women, where we tell women that you don't just need to be nurturers, you can also be providers. And of course, it's your choice. You want to choose both, you want to choose either, it's your choice. But have you even heard of a conversation that anybody is having with men that you don't just have to be providers, you can also be nurturers? Have you ever heard of that conversation? Like
It's happening in the West, I think.
It's what are you talking about? The West has gone worse. The West is like,
I mean,
the downfall is started.
I mean, I've seen some reels.
Please. Oh God, the West is in a much worse situation. I feel like at this point of time where, they're being pushed towards a much more healthier version of masculinity than ever before. You could imagine a man saying, I just want to, like, if a woman, if you're in a healthy relationship with a partner who happens to be a woman, right? And the woman says, you know what, I'm going to earn, I love earning and I'm ambitious. And the man says, you know what, I feel like there needs to be, we have a child or we don't have a child, but I feel like I'm best used at home, or I think I really like the home setup and I want to nurture the home. I want to nurture our child. I want to, do things for you when you come back, because that's who I am as a person. Can you imagine that kind of a person existing in society and not being mocked, shamed, judged, and told off as like a loser, lazy person, weirdo, whatever?
I mean, in today's economy.
I mean, sure, I'm not saying, I'm saying like,
yeah.
If we have accepted women being homemakers, which again is patriarchal, of course, there is pressure for women to be, but there's still now, again, among a subsection of society, there's a choice. But the choice is also not available to men. There is no conversation about nurturing. And hence, and I'm saying right now, I'm talking about nurturing to somebody else. We have not been able to have a conversation in society to men about nurturing themselves. What does it mean for men to have empathy for themselves?
I want to root the conversation back in the lived experience of men and share something that you have taught me, actually, which I didn't realize I do also. And I want to actually articulate this as a thing of like, again, we're three people in a room. We've read a lot of literature. We have access to a certain kind of network that we talk to. We have privilege of information and we have privilege of nuance, which I feel like is one of the rarest privileges in this country, actually. But I feel like the point that we're missing out on is that men don't know all of this stuff.
Correct.
So even if you are giving a set of instructions to men and saying, find more support groups, men don't know that they're doing this also. I genuinely believe that, right? I don't think that it is always just malintent. I feel like it is shifting power as power shifts away from men, which on some level it is, right? And maybe it is moving to a more balanced place, but I feel like men are going to feel like that space is shrinking for them. And this is a normal reaction to that. But what I wanted to talk about, which is something I used to do until you pointed it out, I used to jump very quickly to problem solving. I'm feeling a certain way, how do I solve it? And during COVID only, Nikhil had told me, and he's been telling me to get therapy for really long. I still don't. Men will do anything but go to therapy. I take leadership lessons from a coach, which is essentially professional therapy, because a lot of it like delves into.
I'm judging you.
It's not like bare biceps saying you can do it. It's like, it is very nuanced, like compartmentalization, and it works for me. And I'm going to hold on to that space, because as long as it's working for me, I should schedule a new session with that guy. But the point is that Nikhil told me during COVID that I need to sit with my feelings. And until he pointed it out, I did not know that I don't sit with my feelings. I thought that this is sitting with feelings, where I feel a little bit of discomfort and I'm just like, okay, what is the solution to this? And you alluded to it in between takes also, right? That even when Radhika is venting to me about her problems, my first instinct is to give a solution. And now I've learned over time that I have to just hold space. But at the same time, when I tell her something, I actually want her to give me a solution. So when she holds space, I'm just like, okay, but this is not helping me. I only have to figure it out on my own. So I still talk to her more than I talk to anybody. But even within that, I realize that I'm not doing it properly. And sometimes I don't know how to fix that.
We realize we just don't have these spaces. I realized I did not have these spaces until I started Be a Man. Yaar. I thought I was doing it for everybody else, and I realized I needed that space as well, right? I want to very quickly talk about this one thing, because there's a lot of conversation. You said that men don't necessarily even understand these things.
Yeah.
There is I don't know why historically they've not understood. There is obviously like, what is our conditioning been, what is our training been, etc., etc. But today, the fact is, and this is just this is always brushed under the carpet. Algorithms and technology is forcing men to live in bubbles and forcing everybody to live in bubbles. Forget just men, right? So the question is, when there is discourse around mental health, why are you not finding the discourse? It never comes up in the feeds of the men who may be facing problems. What they are getting is probably like pills, or they're getting these fitness influencers saying that tum body banao, wo theek ho jayega sab kuch.
Solutions.
Solutions, exactly.
Yeah.
They're probably never even getting any conversation around mental health, etc., etc.
I just have one thing to say. It's not like I'm an expert on talking about my emotions, but both of you mentioned how it's tough to kind of open up, right? And I think one thing, like just as a beginner step for other men, because I know you guys have begun to talk about your feelings, I think it's like when you hear women talk or you hear your, male friends talk, don't interrupt them or don't mock them. And just like a side, I don't think this is that serious, but I think it is serious a little bit, which is like, how many men have you seen mocking Taylor Swift? It's like she's talking about her. She's literally, this is catharsis. She's using art to talk about the things, the interpersonal relationships that have affected her. Sure, you could maybe possibly not like her music or her art, but there is a reason why there is a huge fan following of women who relate to that kind of music, to that kind of art. Is cathartic for a lot of women. So I don't know, dude. Like, don't look down upon those conversations, those artists. I mean, that's I think step one. Just try it. Try writing a song about your feelings.
Viral cut down. Taylor Swift, good one. Great. Again, somewhere it starts from mocking, which I think it's so important you made that point. Please do not mock the male friends in your life. And if you genuinely care about the male suicides around you, if you genuinely care about men's mental health, go and ask the men in your lives how they're feeling. You want to talk about this global issue and controversial issue, etc., because it gives you power to go in comments of women and say, did you talk about this? Did you talk about this? Did you talk about this? Are you talking about, forget this case, are you talking about mental health with your friends? Are you going to your male friends in your life and saying, how are you feeling? Are you expressing yourself? वो तुम नहीं कर रहे, बट इसको वेपनाइज करना बड़ा मजा से आता है कि अरे तुमने बात की, कितने मुझे मैसेज आए, तुमने बात की. मैं तो दो एप सीजन बनाया भी है मैन यार के, मैं तो रोज बात करता हूँ, तुम कर रहे हो किसी के साथ बात? So just also think like that. No. Anyway, I get very annoyed when this happens. But again, we never make it about the personal. We never really care about the person. We are always more interested in society just to talk about the issue. Because the issue is drama and it makes us feel fulfilled in some way. Whereas talking about things is uncomfortable, but we must do it because ahead of discomfort is empathy and love.
So, a lot of times, woke men who have mastered the art of expressing, tend to get into this very tricky territory where they feel that because we have begun to now express, we are quote unquote nice men, the reward should be some sort of like romantic arrangement, right? And to those men, and I know nobody will identify themselves as in this category, but I truly want to say that the reward of expressing yourself is just feeling liberated. It's literally, you don't have to look for rewards in finding like female romantic partnerships. It's literally the weight of your chest is just enough to speak your mind. I think it's really like, that's really important.
Such a beautiful point.
And very well said.
So well said. Such a great
Thanks
point.
for saying it, Garima. In case you weren't able to figure out from this conversation, none of us are professional therapists and none of us are experts on men's mental health outside of the work that we do. So I did also speak to Shankul from Mind, who's a therapist who specializes in men's mental health. And here's a snippet of that conversation. There have been cases in the past where men have died by suicide, and a lot of times it makes the headlines when it's a celebrity, right? An actor or somebody in the public sphere who has died by suicide. And sometimes when that happens, one of the most commonly heard things was like, oh, like nobody had any idea that they were grappling with this. They took such a drastic step and we didn't know. you've rightly pointed out that in this case, there were numerous kind of indicators where Manav had tried, he had attempted suicide a few times before this. And his family seemed to be aware that there was a mental health issue at play. So I want you to articulate maybe some of the markers that you were talking about in terms of, if you know men in your life, what signs you can pick up on, and at what point you have to bring in a professional, and also how much of the onus should you leave to the person who is dealing with it. And by that specifically, I mean that if I, for example, have a friend and I know that he's not been doing great, and perhaps there's a loss of job, or say there's a breakup, a romantic breakup, or there is something that has happened which I know is an external factor which is affecting him. But I am trying to nudge him to seek professional help, go to a therapist, but he's not listening. At what point is it my responsibility or someone in his life's responsibility to bring that up with a professional regardless? Or kind of try harder to get him professional?
Right. That's a great question. And of course, in the beginning, they might not let's assume that they might not want to seek professional help in the beginning. But again, coming back to the little conversation on a sense of safety, just check in on them. What we do, safety checks or just regular check-ins, like, hey, how are you doing? It's important for them to know that they have someone to talk to. Maybe they don't want to have the conversation yet, but for them to know that they have the option and the choice to reach out to someone when they feel ready to speak. And it takes time. And oftentimes when we are emotionally vulnerable to a certain intensity, to a certain extent, it's very difficult to think rationally. It's very difficult to think pragmatically. A lot of our cognitive resources will not work to a certain degree, and it takes time. But it's really important to still check in on them, and oftentimes even asking them, hey, so I don't want to come off as too much, but is it okay if I can check in with you every few days? Is that all right with you? Take their permission. Make it a conversation, but get their consent if it's okay, because they shouldn't feel overwhelmed that, oh my God, this guy's, what if, again, the whole thinking that they're a burden as well, that might exacerbate as well. So yes, you might have to be a little conscious about it. But at the end of the day, if you're a friend, and if you're a family member, just remind them that you're there. Again, need not force them, again, they might need space to perhaps even try to understand what they're going through. But that they need to know that you're around. And once they warm up to the idea of you being around and maybe having a conversation with you, yes, then bring up the conversation of, hey, okay, all right, if this seems to be helping in a certain way, in whatever way I can, how about we take this to a professional? Maybe that person could help you out a little more.
No, thanks for that. I think that's helpful, and I think that this hopefully should help a lot of people who kind of have friends, I mean, of any gender who are going through something. Before we wrap up, any points that you want to bring up with regard to the case, with regard to men's mental health, that you think we may not have touched upon?
Yes, if there are men here listening to this who are struggling to speak about certain things, I think fresh off the bat, you need not follow the lone wolf script. It's not worked in the past. Spoiler alert, it's probably not going to work in the future. So seek help, reach out for help, speak with people. The act of speaking in itself can be cathartic, or if not, lighten the load a little. Lighten the load enough for you, for your cognitive faculties to work a little better, for you to take or make more practical decisions. Because it's just not you, it's your friends, it's your family, it affects all of you. So yes, there is a sense of responsibility in seeking help, asking for help, but also understanding the rationale behind it. That it's not just for you, it's also for your friends and family. And give them the opportunity to care for you. Give them the opportunity to help you. Yeah. And strength is also not the absence of struggle, but it's the ability to navigate through that struggle effectively. So struggle is a recurrent theme. It's not new. But how you and how we navigate through that using the right resources, that's the objective here. And there is always help. I repeat, there is always help. Just have to seek it.
Thanks, Shankul. Before we end, I want to go into how we've always ended this podcast is something that makes you hopeful, which is your bud. And I'll go first before either of you because it actually links back to this conversation. Earlier this week, on another group chat with boys, one of them came out to the group, essentially. And this is somebody that we've known for decades, right? We've known for a really long time. He was also very uncomfortable expressing it. And he happened to be drunk, which helped. But he told us about it, and he sent a reply to a message he had sent literally in 2024 January, saying, I have some life-changing stuff to tell you, but I'll tell you when we meet. And it's been a year and X number of months, and he's probably known before that. But he was comfortable enough to articulate it on the group, and the responses were amazing. I have to say I'm very, very proud of that group chat because initially the impulse is to ask questions about it because you want to show interest in it, right? Somebody's talking about something, so you want to. So initially it was all about like, oh, like how long have you known and how has this experience been, you know, like from that perspective. But then we very quickly realized that that's also overwhelming to this person who has just talked about it. And he said, I just need like a little bit of time and I'll get back or whatever. And immediately everybody backed off and said, no, that's like, we also don't want to like burden you with questions or whatever, but sing. And then he just kind of ended it by saying, I'm so glad I finally told you guys. It feels surreal that I've told you because like for years I've been thinking about how you folks would react. And it's a highlight. And I think it's my bud, not just for this week, but probably for like this year that this has happened. And it just so happened to happen this week. But yeah, you guys have buds.
No, you do have
कुछ
but
नहीं है.
What?
I can't.
You didn't think?
I didn't think.
What's making you hopeful?
Tomorrow is sisterhood, so that's
Yeah.
making me hopeful.
Well, this episode will
Plug
come out
in.
after sisterhood is
Yeah, the
done.
episode will come, but like if you were there, if you know, you know.
That's a vague enough thing to say.
No, I'm
Before
saying
slash after
sisterhood.
it.
I'm saying I don't know what else am I hopeful about.
You think we'll come back to you?
You know, honestly, like I've been very hopeful seeing some of the comments around our conversation. You know, whenever we put it out on, last episode, YouTube, Instagram, of course, there was some hate and all we received. But it's so much more gratifying to see that the hate versus people not just agreeing with what we say, because that's not important, sharing their experiences in the comment section, that started happening. And that is what we started this for, man. So for me, it just makes me so hopeful that anytime we have a conversation like this, there are a bunch of people who are just like, hey, I've gone through something similar. I have resonated with this. This has been my life. And I feel like if we are able to do that as a society, we'll be a much healthier society. So I'm really grateful and thankful to everyone in the comment sections who writes and shares their experiences, and to all the people who give us hate. Keep watching, because I'm sure that some point of time you're probably also going to pick something up that might be useful to you.
Very mature.
Can I take the butt from here only that everybody who has sent hate comments to Nikhil on the videos, I have just straight up gone and blocked them, because I'm like, I'm not even giving them an opportunity to like hate me in the future. I'm like, bye.
Wow.
Out.
Thank you, friends, for this conversation. We will not show you the version of the outro that we have edited, but it was fun. You can believe us, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you,
Talk to
Kevin.
your
Happy
friends.
birthday.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.
Thanks, friends. When we do this next, I'll be 32. I
Woo.
wonder if I'm going to get wiser with age. Thank you for watching that episode of So What. If you liked it, then please like this video. Subscribe to We Are Yuva on all social media platforms. We also have a separate So What by Yuva handle on Instagram that you can follow. We also have a Substack where now I have written an article, so I can ask you to go and follow that Substack as well. And this episode is also available on audio platforms, so please check it out wherever you get your podcasts. I've always wanted to say that, wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for watching.